welcome to the afternoon session of Student Scholar Days. I'm so happy to see lots of students in the audience. Thank you for coming to support your friend. So please help me in joining Dr. Richard Goddard and his student.
Okay, you can go right ahead.
Okay.
I'll walk around it.
All right.
If there's one word that can be used to describe Reuben Chavira, it is passion. This is his first semester here, and already he's impressed a lot of people. You only have to be around him for a few minutes, and you recognize that passion. And it's infectious. He starts generating passion in others. Passion over everything. Which, by the way, provided the acronym POET for the club he's already formed on campus. He has that remarkable ability to draw people out and get them to start expressing their own ideas. Fundamentally, Reuben is a humanist. He's interested in almost every aspect of what it means to be a human being, and that's what drew me into what he's doing as an anthropologist. He's interested in anthropology, linguistics, he's interested in psychology, all of the things that make humans what they are. And so, I will let Reuben speak for himself.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Reuben Chavira, and the topic of my, or the title of my presentation is Poetry, Prosody, and the Language of Passion, and how it relates to social change or creating social movement, particularly within the at-risk communities. I also would like to introduce Amanda. She's going to be doing some live painting for us, doing some, she's going to feed off of your guys' energy, so hopefully you guys are engaged and inspired. My presentation is meant to be more of a qualitative presentation, so it's kind of how it applies to life and how we can grow from it. It is research-based, there's data behind it, but that's kind of outside of the scope of my presentation. Mine was just more on how we can use these things in the real world. So a little bit about my background. I'm from California, from a small city called La Puente, California. It's in East LA. There's about 40,000 residents in my city, and about that converts down to about 11,500 people per square mile. And to compare that, this presentation is not a comparison between my city and Alamosa, but to compare that, Alamosa has about 1,800 people per square mile compared to our 11,500. So you can imagine social causes are at the forefront of what we deal with on a daily basis. There's about 8 gangs in my community. Only 40,000 people, 8 gangs, and it's not very, it might be slightly bigger than Alamosa, to tell you the truth. There's just a lot more buildings. My experience that led me to becoming a student scholar within this field is I have a background in spoken word poetry. I've performed at the university level. Kind of like the pinnacle was when I was able to perform at USC, the University of Southern California. And that was really, I think, when I started to look at poetry from more of just like a personal narrative, and I started looking at it in a more academic, what am I actually doing with this type of perspective. The quote I have there at the bottom reads, "Poetry isn't a function the body performs, it's how my soul keeps warm while going through life." After becoming a spoken word artist, I kind of moved away from performing and became a lot more interested in using poetry as a form of education. Excuse me. And one of my first experiences was at Nogales High School. And I was a poetry coordinator with one of the teachers there, and we helped establish one of the, actually it was the first poetry program in this high school's history. It's in La Puente, and they've been doing it about 8 years now. And countless of their students that have joined that club have gone on to colleges and have also received scholarships for their participation in this poetry-based program. Another was when I worked with an AP senior at Santa Fe High School using poetry as part of her senior project. She ended up getting 2 performing arts scholarships as a result of using poetry in her academics. Roymore Elementary was when I started to see the social movement. I had already kind of identified that, hey, poetry has a significant individual influence on a person when they're just trying to maybe sort things out for themselves. But when I started teaching an in-class poetry curriculum at the 6th grade level, I really, I thought I was gonna go in there to teach them, and it turned out they taught me so much more about myself and about life, and I think I can honestly say that first group of 6th graders is why I'm here today, and I really wanted to acknowledge that because it really goes to show that social change that is the overlaying theme of this presentation. A little more recently at Mariposa Elementary School. All of these schools, by the way, are in California, in the LA area. All have similar characteristics in terms of low socioeconomic status, predominantly Hispanic, not a very high graduation rate in terms of transferring to a college right out of high school. At Mariposa Elementary School, they hadn't had a book fair in over 3 years. And a lot of the families of those students are Spanish speakers, and the majority of their teachers were English speakers. And I think because of a disconnect between that, it was really hard to convey, hey, reading is important, because they were just trying to understand each other on a very conversational level. To get into the presentation, I kind of felt like, I was a little intimidated in terms of how does my presentation relate or compare kind of to the other presentations that were going on today, because like the professor told you earlier, this is my first semester here, and I'm new to the Adams State culture, the Adams State environment, and I was like, mine's a little more qualitative. It's not so much statistics driven, but I had stumbled upon this quote by Ayn Rand. It's the question isn't who is going to let me, it's who is going to stop me. And that's kind of how I feel when I'm passionate about something. That's kind of the courage and bravery that it gives to me to meet new friends, like my poet club who are in attendance. Thank you. And so yeah, and the picture is symbolic of kind of, it's opinionated, I suppose, but what society wants us to think. And it's very linear, very step-by-step and sequential. And then I'm in class kind of like on the right, and inside of my head, I'm listening to a professor, a teacher, but what's really going on inside of my head is all kinds of creativity. I don't even really know what's going on, and but yeah, I enjoy it. So the components of the discussion are poetry, prosody, and passion. We won't be going into detail about them. I'll discuss them quickly, and I'll emphasize things that I think you need to know. But more importantly than knowing the specifics of them is how they combine to actually create that social change. So poetry can be described and explained in many, many, many ways depending on who you ask. But for the scope of this presentation, I chose the perspective that poetry communicates a thought or emotion, whether it's written, spoken, or in action, like performed poetry, for instance. Prosody, I defined as communicating a meaning or emotion. For instance, prosody is the intonation of your voice. When you hear someone speaking, sometimes it fluctuates in how loud it is. They have a squeaky voice or they have a deep voice. All those differences equate to what prosody is. And when you're able to utilize these differences in speech patterns, the human ear has a tendency to pick up on it differently. And so if we know that, then we can identify that in using our social change, our social cause, when we present the vision for what we're trying to initiate and why it's important to do it. You don't want to just be dry and kind of emotionless when you're trying to say, hey, this is really important. And I think just in that little thing that I did right there's a difference in even how much I believed in what I was saying. And then passion, of course, it's an energy. When you're passionate about something, you tend to just have more willingness to do something. Your level of activity is increased. So we're kind of combining the ideas of communicating a thought in a specific way driven by a particular energy is how it kind of defines as. And the common characteristics between the three of them are that all three are communicative. That means they're all conveying a message or meaning. They're effective, which means that they convey emotion, and that they're social, which means that they incorporate others. I think if there wasn't other people around, it wouldn't matter how we said anything, because you'd be the only one listening. My quote is, Einstein said, "I have no special talents, I am only passionately curious." And that's kind of a weird thing to say for one of the most brilliant geniuses of all time, to say, I'm not talented, I'm just very curious. But it also inspires me to say, hey, I felt like Einstein was way smarter than me or way more talented than me. And he says, no, I'm not, I'm just curious. And I said, hey, I'm curious too. Let me go learn something, right? So, I try to simplify things as best I can. The modes of development that are really dominant in my presentation are the psychosocial perspective in terms of the psychological impact in relation to social activities or social bodies, being around other people, interacting with them in a variety of ways, and what that does to you as a person. Social linguistics, kind of how speech is developed in relation to the people that you are surrounded by. So if you're in an academic setting, then your sociolinguistic pattern will have a more formal, more appropriate, more structured, kind of follow all the rules of grammar. Whereas if you're just around maybe high school graduates, it might be a lot more loose. It might be less conformed to the actual rules of language. And sociocultural perspective in terms of how individual beliefs and values and those types of things, how they impact the social group. So a social group with diverse backgrounds will have a much broader culture within their own social group. For instance, in the Poet Club, we have a heavily diverse background with the students that are actually participating in relation to their major. And as a result, I've found that we've had a lot of great ideas, and I think that's led to the early success of the Poet Club. So communicate affection socially is kind of what I'm saying in this presentation. It's okay to be in touch with your emotions. It's okay to have an effective nature. And when you're in touch with your emotions, that doesn't mean you're just crying all the time, or you're just telling everybody you love them. That's one emotion. And sometimes you hear people say, well, I don't have emotions, but they're always angry. Well, that anger is an emotion, so maybe you are in touch with your emotions. But I think the important aspect of what I'm trying to say is that your metacognitive understanding of your emotions, and what that means is when you're feeling any particular emotion, how much are you familiar with exactly what that is? A lot of times we say, well, when someone asks, how do you feel? And you say, well, I don't really know. That leaves a lot of margin for error in interpreting, well, how do you feel and how does that relate to my life and all of these other things. So I think the angle that I'm saying is, if we create a social norm of expressing these emotional aspects of our lives, we'll raise the emotional IQ of the social group, and I think that will increase pro-social behaviors like compassion, sympathy, empathy, and things like that. So I think it's really important that we create social constructs that not only empower our emotions, but actually create channels of productivity for them. So when we say, okay, I've mastered my emotions, now what can I do with this? A lot of times there's not that thing that pops out like, hey, I'm in control of myself, let me go do something. Normally it's like, yeah, you're an adult, good job, you matured, right? But I think especially for us college students, we're learning so many things at once. And I think one of the most important things of learning is doing. And a lot of times, if we feel like there's nothing to do with the things that we're learning, it won't really sink in. And so when it comes to social cause and social movement, I think those social constructs, if they're properly created, they actually create the framework that the social movement is built upon. And when it's creating that synergy and it's creating that energy, it's feeding off of those social constructs that were the fundamental essence of what it was. And lastly, the social discourse of what poetry, prosody, and passion allow for, I think is a lot more inspirational. For instance, when we're discussing presentation topics as these, for myself in particular, I'm a lot more able to be less worried about crowd reaction, because I had a good time when I was building this research, and I know that it was really important and that it had a significant impact. And so it's important for me to kind of present it in a way that you guys can understand that this isn't something that I hope comes true one day somewhere. This is more of a description of something that's actually occurred, and my presentation, I hope, conveys in an academic perspective what it is that happened. And so I think that's what I meant by creating social discourse, because discourse is it's a little more complex than just like conversation. It's a lot more in-depth and detailed. So I have a series of photos that I have prepared, and they're kind of different examples of kind of communicating that affection socially. And the example that I chose for that form of communication was hugging. Hugging, I think everybody's participated in the act of hugging at least once in their lives, whether you wanted to or not. And hugging just kind of, in my opinion, it just has so many layers, because there's the two people who are hugging, and then if you're looking at the hug, or if you haven't been hugged, there's all these different things that tie into it that I think reinforce the different ideas of what I'm trying to say. So in this perspective, what do you think is the idea of this? Someone took a picture and it had a meaning. What do you think the meaning of this was? What do you think is happening between those two girls? Do you think they're enemies? Do you think they're friends?
Bonding.
I'm sorry?
Bonding.
They're bonding, exactly. A hug it gives that essence of bonding, right? Where in here does it say racism? Nowhere, right? So right there, we just broke down a social construct with one picture of these two little girls hugging. Then now there's no more racism. There's just two little girls hugging, and that is just it's a lot more complex than that. But I just wanted to show how bringing together this, to me, is poetic, in my opinion. My sister has a mixed background. So when I see something like this, it inspires me poetically. It makes me want to speak about it. It creates passion in me, and it makes me want to tie it into something relevant, such as an academic perspective. And so while I was kind of pulling all these different things together, as the doctor kind of mentioned, I have an interest in a lot of backgrounds, because I'm not exactly sure when it comes to the idea of combining poetry, prosody, and passion. I'm not really sure what discipline that falls under. And I think it falls under many disciplines, and I think that's what gives it an even more empowering aspect, is that poetry, prosody, and passion, when used properly, aren't restricted to just one thing. It can cross many different layers of life, of the human condition, and I think that knowing that, we can really use that as a mechanism for change in a variety of ways. So the medicinal effects of hugging, this is kind of probably maybe a little bit of pseudoscience, but it says, hugging is good medicine. It transfers energy and gives the person hugged an emotional lift. You need 4 hugs a day for survival, 8 for maintenance, and 12 for growth. Scientists say that hugging is a form of communication because it can say things you don't have words for. And the nicest thing about a hug is that you usually can't give one without getting one, right? So that's pretty good. I wish everybody was sitting next to each other. I'd make you guys all hug each other. But again, probably a little bit of pseudoscience, but it was a little bit of humor involved with it. I just love how universal a hug is, because I seen you back there, Professor. As soon as you saw this picture, you smiled and you seemed to have this surge of positive emotion. And I think that's great, and I think that's what's important about communicating your emotions is it's contagious and people want to participate, and I saw a little hug back there. So already the presentation's almost reinforcing itself in that demonstration. Thank you. The image of hugging. This is important to me because what I'm eventually building towards, I'd like to go to grad school and study social neuroscience. And this particular picture, I put this in there because the image of hugging How many of you guys, as soon as you saw that, you knew that was a hug? I see Ryan smiling, looking at it. So, but that's important because, oh man, really? Can I go into my question and answer time?
Yes.
Okay. Because we have what's called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons, they fire, so when you see something happening that you've done, they fire, and you kind of identify that. So you see that picture of a hug, you've hugged before, and it gives you that same sensation, right? So that's pretty cool. The overwhelmed hugging, that kind of speaks for itself. The innocent hugging, right? So hugging kind of, it spans the ages. Same animals hugging. Don't know if this is Photoshop, but it's interesting that hugging now crosses species. And I know my dog has hugged me before, and I'm kind of like, are you hugging me, or did you just see me hug for long enough that you're doing this to me? But bears, I mean, I'm not really sure. Now we got cross species, right? So again, don't know if this is Photoshop, but we still can identify that as a hug, and we're still getting a good feeling out of it. And let's see. The unconditional hugging. Now we really ask ourselves, what benefit does the tiger have to hug the human, right? Don't really know, can't really speak on it, but I just wanted to give all these different examples of the hug and kind of give a different perspective for each one. So affections, so those were all kind of examples of like different constructs of what hugging can kind of convey. This is the social movement. Social movements are at once the symptoms and the instruments of progress. Walter Lippmann. Swag Club is an example that I chose because SWAG stands for Suicide Watch and Awareness Gang, and this is a very personal topic for many people, and it inspires passion and many for advocacy, and I really feel that in the Swag Club. So I wanted to use them as a microcosm of how poetry, prosody, and passion kind of intertwine to create social movement, social change. SWAG last semester, from what I understand, created what was called 100 Reasons to Stay Alive. And what they did is they went around campus and they filmed little bits. They had people write their own reason for why they're alive, what they love about living. And then they wrote on an index card and they held it. They didn't read it, they just held it. And it was 100 people, so it was like a video, just 100 clips. And they presented it at the halftime of a football game. And it had a really huge, very inspiring response. Students were, at least 100 students got to think about why they love to be alive. And if that's all that movement did, that's a great thing to have happen. So that's a small thing, not a small thing, but I mean a small social group that was able to leverage a pretty significant inspiration. And then the macrocosm of social movement and the civil rights movement. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? And I think this is kind of the cry of anybody who's trying to create change for the better. Martin Luther King I chose as a poet. People fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other. And he kind of looks like he's lamenting that fact right there in that picture. So I like how the idea of combining the visual with the wording kind of, that to me in my perspective, that same thing of the visual and the words combining to emphasize his point is what I think poetry and prosody do to kind of add to passion and add to what you're trying to do. The prosody here, you see him a lot more engaged in what he's saying. He just looks like he's being more emotional. I have decided to stick with love, he said. Hate is too great a burden to bear. And this was essentially just like prosody is used to change or add to the meanings of a message. I think that that was his underlying message. That was what he believed in, and then the civil rights movement just kind of exploded out of that. But he had a passion for love, and he just kind of completely polarized against hate, and you've seen what he did when he was able to harness his energy, harness his positive emotions, and utilize it for a mechanism of social change. And the passion of course, was, I think emphasized or seen most in the Million Man March. And he says, we must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. The open mic is a form of social discourse. The Poet Club hosts open mics every Sunday in the Student Life Center. This gentleman right here, he's been my mentor since I was 19 years old. His name is Corey Kofer. His poet name is Best Kept. He's a high school teacher in my community, and he has the second longest running poetry venue in California, in the entire West Coast. It's been going for 13 years. They just had their 13th birthday in October, and that is huge for a venue. I think my fellow club members understand how hard it is in the last 3 months to run something every week, and he's done it for 13 years, every single Thursday. And again, there's really no other explanation other than he is truly passionate about what he does. There's times where there'd be maybe 1 or 2 people there, and he's up there with the same enthusiasm and the same energy as if there was 100 people. And that, I think, what poetry, passion, and prosody have combined within him is a level of character and humility that is just, it's great to me. His venue is called the Mic and Dim Lights. So what is all this? How does all this help the at-risk? To escape the at-risk, I have several real quick ideas. Don't be a statistic is what my grandpa always used to yell at me before I went out. No matter what people tell you, words and ideas can change the world. So escape the at-risk, reform the at-risk, overcome the at-risk, unify the at-risk, inspire the at-risk, and be an opponent of apathy. I think is such an important thing. Whether you're in an at-risk environment, whether you're at a university, it's so easy to stop caring. And I think it's important that we continue to do it through poetry, look for magic in the daily routines, do it through prosody, this guy cracks me up, do it through passion. And all of this, I promise you guys, you'll endure hardships, if you're ahead of your time, and we will prevail. So thank you very much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Can you give a round of applause for Amanda as well? You want to turn it around and let them see? So it's slightly not finished, but I think it's a great start. There you go. So this is just literally an example of her hearing my passion and saying, yes, I would love to participate. So I want to thank her again for actually just being here and doing this. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Professor. And